guys, it's Tom here and welcome to a major update to the Manchester City potential relegation and 115 charges that are leveled against Manchester City. And remember that even before the hearing started, Manchester City countersued the Premier League about the state sponsorships and basically the associated party transactions. That's what they are calling it. Many English journalists are reporting about this, and I will give you guys a major update in this video, but the gist of it is that Manchester City's attempts to challenge the Premier League's associated party rules, broader decision-making structure seems to have failed. This is in regards to state sponsors being able to just pay Man City or Newcastle anything that they like and not pay the fair market value. And it looks like Man City have failed in their argument, in their process, trying to convince the Premier League that it's unlawful. And I think it would have a devastating consequences for the Premier League if Newcastle and Man City were allowed to just get sponsorships from their owners, the state of Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, that was not fair market value. And imagine Newcastle could get a sponsorship for £1 billion from the state of Saudi Arabia, because they have like hundreds of billions of pounds, and then Newcastle would have just unlimited amount of money, and that would completely destroy the Premier League and completely destroy the integrity of the Premier League. So beyond potential tiny concessions related to a database, it seems that Man City has secured very little at a huge expense, because they paid tens of millions of pounds to lawyers, and it looks like under the Premier League rule, the league is bound not to be transparent about what happened. And that's what annoys me the most, that even this case and the 115 trial is completely secret, completely done behind closed doors, even though it will have seismic, huge repercussions to the whole Premier League and to the wider football world. And it is beyond imagination that they thought it's a good idea that there is no transparency and they would be just done in secret behind closed doors, and we will only hear the outcome and maybe the reasoning. Let me know how do you feel about that in the comments below. And if you enjoyed these videos, as always, leave a like, it really helps me out, and subscribe if you're new around here on my channel. I mainly post Liverpool related videos. As you can see, I'm a massive Liverpool fan, but I also post other videos, career mode stuff, and Premier League news as well. So only with the agreement of the parties to the arbitration they may produce and circulate to the board, which could distribute to the Premier League clubs an anonymized summary of the award. Is that good governance? Hell no. A tiny concession related to access to an anonymized sponsorship database appears to be the sum total of what threatens to be a major attack on how the Premier League operates. So far, there is no sign of any big rule changes as a result of that case. The sad thing is the lack of transparency built into the Premier League's rules means the only way anything can ever really be confirmed in the case if there is a major, huge ruling that will affect all Premier League clubs. That's when we will know something major happened. Perhaps even no confirmation that there is a ruling unless the Premier League clubs vote for it and agree. And everybody is now speculating about the alleged outcome of the Manchester City case against Premier League's Rule X arbitration and who might have won and what, but nobody can know what the result is and how it was reached, because the Premier League cling on to absolute secrecy. That's what Nick DeMarco is reporting. It does their reputation no good at all at a time where the government is considering the powers of a new independent football regulator to keep such important matters of football regulation that affect the whole competition secret. If there is a decision of the very learned panel, it should now be published. And I think we are reaching a stage where sooner or later it will be inevitable that the government will indeed put an independent football regulator in charge of Premier League affairs, because this secrecy undermines the supporters' belief in the Premier League to function with integrity. And sooner or later the government has to step in, but then that's against UEFA and FIFA rules, which state that no government can have direct influence over any major football league. And another journalist argues, I can understand why private companies would want the ability to hold arbitration and mediation in private, but in situations where the Premier League clubs believe there is a need for transparency, they should be able to override this secrecy and vote for this hearing to be made public, or this verdict to be made public. All independent commissions arbitrating on rule breaking should be public by default, no closed doors. Right now the rules tie the hands of the Premier League's administrators, and they shouldn't. And if this report is accurate that Man City failed to challenge the Premier League's associated party transaction rules, it means that Man City very much lost its action on associated party transactions, worse than we expected. I never believed that they could overturn these rules, this journalist writes. However, I have anticipated they would at least be able to overturn the rule change that requires clubs to have the burden of proof on a fair market value for associated party transactions. So FMV stands for fair market value. Basically, is the sponsorship fair market value, or is it an inflated price of a sponsorship? This would imply they did not and only got a concession whereby they have access to their database with valuations in order to help them assess fair market value in case of sponsorships. If this is the case, then that's a big loss for Manchester City. But if you look at the clubs that backed Newcastle and Manchester City, who of course are state-owned, in blocking widening of associated party transaction rules this year, you can see impact of state ownership on the process. Some of those other owners of other clubs that backed Newcastle and Man City, in ways large and small, have links to those outside of football, to those states outside of football. And that's the problem. Newcastle and Man City, because they are state-owned, they could have so much influence. Basically, the whole country of Saudi Arabia or the whole country of United Emirates could invest into many different projects which benefit different clubs in the Premier League, and they could influence their voting process and their decision making. And the fan reaction shows today why football regulation should be removed from the Premier League, displayed by the fan reaction. Every fan wants rules that mean their team can win. That's normal, but it may not benefit the health of the game of football overall. And the clubs who make the rules behave the same way as well. Another journalist, Mike Keegan, however, reported that Manchester City appear to have scored a victory over the Premier League on associated party transactions after a vote to amend rules was pulled at the last minute from this morning's club meeting. But this is mainly speculation of what Mike Keegan is saying, because he's just speculating that this could indicate Man City have been successful in their legal challenge, and that's a potentially huge development. And it was introduced, these associated party transaction rules, in December 2021, when Saudi Arabia overtook Newcastle United, and all the other Premier League clubs got really scared because they now saw what state ownership can do to a club like Manchester City. So the rules were designed to maintain the competitiveness of the Premier League by preventing clubs from inflating commercial deals with companies linked to their owners. And why this court case is so important is because Manchester City were found guilty of 54 charges relating to inflated sponsorships and giving them more money than what is fair market value. So I think this case has major repercussions for the trial that Man City are facing for the 115 charges of breaching financial fair play rules. The rules dictate that such transactions have to be independently assessed to be of fair market value. And the recent rule change was that the clubs themselves need to prove to the Premier League that these sponsorship deals are fair market value, not the other way around. It wasn't the Premier League who needed to prove that they were fair market value, but the clubs that get these sponsorships themselves had to. A central pillar of those new rules was a data bank to which clubs are required to submit all commercial contracts and which in certain circumstances can be used to validate the value of such deals. Because if you have a big database of a lot of different sponsorships, then you can see their fair market value compared to a lot of other sponsorship deals. And the Times newspaper understands that the 20 Premier League clubs were due to vote on some small changes to rules specific to this data bank at the shareholders meeting in London yesterday, but the clubs were to be asked to vote on restricting access to the data bank. The vote was removed from the agenda late on Wednesday night. So this is where the speculation comes from. Why was the vote or the voting on this case, on this data bank, removed? But sources close to Man City and the Premier League conflicted not only on that specific point, but who they believe has gained the upper hand in the wider associated party transactions case. The problem here is it's a secret, confidential case. But I'm sure if the judgment ever comes out, both sets of lawyers will claim they won. But the Times newspaper said that the last minute withdrawal is the indication that a City legal team, led by Lord Panic, has enjoyed some success in convincing an independent panel that the rules on sponsorship deals are unlawful and need to be changed. But other journalists, as I showed you before, speculated that this means that Man City failed in their process to restrict these associated party transaction rule changes. But the planned vote was not a direct consequence of the arbitration. It is the view that it had to be removed from the meeting agenda because of the anticipated outcome of Man City's legal challenge against the Premier League. It is pointless amending the rule regarding the data bank if there are going to be more detailed changes to the rules very soon. The process is ongoing. The Times understands that the lawyers acting for City and the Premier League have been notified of the panel's judgment, but it has not reached the stage where it has been shared with other clubs. So it's still going on in secret behind closed doors, which is really annoying. It looks shady, it's not transparent, and it's not what fans want. And it's not what the Premier League wants, because their reputation is going down the drain day by day, week by week, month by month. Only once that these findings have been shared with the clubs, then it will be presented with potential rule changes. With those changes, then will be put to a vote. Clubs expected to be notified of the outcome to the case based on the assumption that the rules allowed it to be shared if both parties agreed. But for now, the other 19 clubs except Manchester City remain in the dark. They don't know what's going on. So now we, the public, we don't know what's going on either. With a relatively straightforward shareholders meeting finishing after only 2 hours. The development comes with the Premier League's case against Man City for 115 alleged breaches of financial rules now in its second week. It remains to be seen how a change of associated party transaction rules could impact the case concerning those alleged breaches, but many of the charges concern Man City's sponsorship agreements. That's why this is so significant. That's why I'm making this video, to let you guys know of the latest developments. And that ongoing hearing, which is expected to last 10 weeks, could lead to huge fines for Man City and even relegation for Manchester City potentially. The clubs, all other clubs fear that if Man City are successful in a lawsuit against the Premier League, it could enable the richest clubs to value their sponsorship deals without independent assessment, vastly boosting the amount of money they can raise and therefore giving them, a lot of money to spend on players, on wages. The private arbitration rules forbid the parties involved from discussing the matter. The Premier League declined to comment, and Man City of course said we are not in a position to comment either. And of course this report got Man City fans way too excited. They thought that now the 115 charges will go away and they will just win against the Premier League. The strong likelihood is that Man City has not won anything material in their challenge to the associated party transactions, the state of sponsorships basically. I have always thought they stood a good chance in a challenge against the recent rule change, where clubs have the burden of proof on fair market value for these sponsorships instead of the Premier League. But in fact, they think they were right in challenging this. It was an unfair rule because the Premier League are in a far better position to determine and prove fair market value. However, this journalist says, I strongly doubt they have been able to overturn these sponsorship rules of associated party transactions. We shall know soon enough. As for the impact on the 115 plus charges, there is none on liability. This would not help Manchester City prevent the Premier League proving the charges in any way. If Panic has somehow managed to have the associated party transaction rules overturned, again this is very unlikely, but if he managed somehow to do it, then this opens the door for him to argue for lighter sanctions on these 115 charges, but only from a lens of sporting impact. So what do you think about this latest update? Do you think Man City will win their case against the Premier League in terms of challenging these associated party transactions? Because I think if they win that, then that will have major repercussions to the Premier League. Can you imagine a league where the richest clubs who are state-owned can outspend everybody else? That would basically mean Man City and Newcastle will be the top two for eternity. As long as their state is funding them, they will be just spending the most amount of money, and they can outspend anyone by 10 or 20 times. And that would mean absolutely unthinkable consequences for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world as well, because the transfer market is insane as it is. Can you imagine if Newcastle were able to spend £1 billion on players in 1 or 2 years? That would be absolutely disastrous for the Premier League, in my opinion. Let me know what is yours in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a nice day. See you later. Goodbye.